Wrong VGM. Hello. Hello. Konbini wa. I'm alive again. Oh my god. It's gonna caption horribly. Hello. It is I. Cora Velorum. Pink alien, no longer dead. I found my bogos, and I binted them. So we are safe. We are safe from the bogo binters. I have no introduction. It's been like, I haven't streamed in like a week, and I'm like, actually, let's just get into the stream. I'm so bad at the beginning parts of stream. Today, we are reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, probably like the first chapter or two, for the Donathon reward goals. I bint bogos. Are we ready to bint bogos? This is a story about the galaxy, which I am from. Something something alien joke. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Okay. It's gonna look like I'm looking down the whole time because I'm looking at the... Actually, I wonder, can I move this? My keyboard. Oh, my keyboard. Move this. I wonder if I recalibrate this, it'll work. There we go. Yeah, there we go. See. Alright. Let me turn down the BGM volume for you. Turn it up for me. I gotta find some jazz. Hold on. I don't read without jazz. Oh, my ad blocker got turned off. I forgot about that. Oh. YouTube. God, I hate ads. There we go. Oh, this is a vibe. This is a vibe. This is a vibe. I'm ready. Okay. Chapter 1. What is chapter 1 called? Hold on. Chapter 1. Oh, is it really called The Hitchhiker's Guide? Yeah, it's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Okay. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this, at a distance of roughly 98 million miles, is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended lifeforms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. I love my Apple Watch. What are you talking about? I love my Apple Watch. My Appy Watch. I gotta charge my Appy Watch. Where was I? Oh. This planet has, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movement of small green pieces of paper, which is odd, because on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And so the problem remained. Lots of the people were mean, and most of them were miserable, even the ones with digital watches. How's it going? It's going great, Punished. We're Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all make a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place. And some said that even the trees had been a bad move, and that no one should have ever left the oceans. And then, one Thursday, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change, a girl sitting on her own in a small cafe in Rickmansworth suddenly realized what it was that had been going wrong all this time, and she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time, it was right. It would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, however, before she could get to a phone to tell anyone about it, a terrible, stupid catastrophe occurred, and the idea was lost forever. This is not her story. But it is the story of that terrible, stupid catastrophe and some of its consequences. It's also the story of the book. A book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not an Earth book, never published on Earth, and until the terrible catastrophe occurred, never even seen or heard of by any Earthman. Nevertheless, a wholly remarkable book. In fact, it was probably the most remarkable book ever to come out of the great publishing corporations of Ursa Minor, of which no Earthman had ever heard either. Not only is it a wholly remarkable book, it is also a highly successful one, more popular than the Celestial Home Care Omnibus, better selling than 53 More Things to Do in Zero Gravity, and more controversial than Ulan Kolopid's trilogy of philosophical blockbusters, Where God Went Wrong, some more of God's greatest mistakes, and Who is this God person anyways? And many of the more relaxed civilizations on the outer eastern rim of the galaxy. The Hitchhiker's Guide has already supplanted the great Encyclopedia Galactica as the standard repository of all knowledge and wisdom, for though it has many omissions and contains much that is apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate, it scores over the older, more pedestrian work in two important respects. First, it is slightly cheaper. And second, it has the words, "Don't Panic," inscribed in large friendly letters on its cover. But the story... Sorry, this book is so funny. But the story of this terrible, stupid Thursday, the story of its extraordinary consequences, and the story of how these consequences are inextricably intertwined with this remarkable book begins very simply. It begins with a house. Oh, now we're on chapter 1. Okay. I found the chapter 1, guys. Me and my Taco Bell Baja Blast. Best thing to come off of Earth. Second to IKEA and Dunkin'. Sorry, I can hear myself too well and I don't like it. Chapter 1. The house stood on a slight rise just on the edge of the village. It stood on its own and looked at it over... We're not doing that. We're listening to looped music again because I'm not sitting to listen to ads for God knows how long. Do I have different jazz music? Hold on. One of these is jazz, right? There we go. Found it. Okay. Okay. Duncan is still mid. You're mid. Silence. The text on this book is so tiny, so I'm like trying to... I mean, hi. Yeah. Yeah, you're mid. Don't you ever insult Duncan again in my presence. The house stood on a slight rise, just on the edge of the village. It stood on its own and looked out over a broad spread of West Country farmland. Not a remarkable house by any means. It was about 30 years old, squattish, squarish, made of brick, and had 4 windows set in the front of a size proportion which more or less exactly failed to please the eye. The only person for whom the house was in any special way was Arthur Dent, and that was only because it happened to be the one he lived in. He had lived in it for about 3 years, ever since he had moved out of London, because it made him nervous and irritable. He was about 30. Oh, I forgot he's from London. I have to do a British accent, don't I? 56% on my tablet. It's hell tiny on my tablet too, though. Dunkin' is better than Starbucks for sure, not that high a bar. Starbucks sucks, and I'll stand by that. He was about 30 as well. Tall, dark-haired, and never quite at ease with himself. The thing that used to worry him most was the fact that people always used to ask him what he was looking so worried about. He worked in a local radio, which he always used to tell his friends was a lot more interesting than they probably thought. It was, too. Oh, it was too. Most of his friends worked in advertising. On a Wednesday night, it rained very heavily. The lane was wet and muddy, but the Thursday morning sun was bright and clear as it shone on Arthur Dent's house for what was to be the last time. It hadn't properly registered yet with Arthur that the council wanted to knock it down and build a bypass instead. Man, I love I love people that buy out houses. My favorite. Dunkin' has weak-ass coffee. You never had a Dunkin' Dunka Latte. Those things are fire. At 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, Arthur didn't feel very good. He woke up bleary, got up, wandered blearily around his room, opened a window, saw a bulldozer, found his slippers, and stomped off to the bathroom to wash. Toothpaste from the brush, so scrub. Shaving mirror pointed at the ceiling. He adjusted it. For a moment, it reflected a second bulldozer through the bathroom window. Properly adjusted, it reflected Arthur Dent's bristles. He shaved them off, washed, dried, and stomped off to the kitchen to find something pleasant to put in his mouth. Sorry. Capitalism is fun and not depressing at all. I know, right? Kettle, plug, fridge, milk, coffee, yawn. The word bulldozer wandered through his mind for a moment in search of something to connect with. The bulldozer outside the kitchen window was quite a big one. He stared at it. Oh, hold on, I have to do my British. Yellow. A, B, C, D. Top of the morning. No, that's Irish. Hello, governor. What a fine day it is. Yellow, he thought, and stomped off back to his bedroom to get dressed. Passing the bedroom, he stopped to drink a large glass of water. And another. He began to suspect that he was hungover. Why was he hungover? Had he been drinking the night before? He supposed that he must have been. He caught a glint in the shaving mirror. Yellow, he thought, and stomped onto the bedroom. He stood and thought. The pub, he thought. Oh dear, the pub. He vaguely remembered being angry. Angry about something that seemed important. He had been telling people about it at great length. He rather suspected. His clearest visual recollection was of glazed looks on other people's faces. Something about a new bypass he had just found out about. It had been in the pipeline for months, only no one seemed to have known about it. Ridiculous. He took a swig of water. It would sort itself out, he decided. No one wanted a bypass. The council didn't have a leg to stand on. It would sort itself out. God, what a terrible hangover it earned him, though. He looked at himself in the wardrobe mirror. He stuck out his tongue. Yellow, he thought. The word yellow wandered through his mind in search of something to connect with. 15 seconds later, he was out of the house and lying in front of a big yellow bulldozer that was advancing up the garden path. I watched every episode of the BBC drama version. I own it. I own the television series and the movie. So long and thanks for all the fish. I wish it had to come to this. I've seen this. I've actually read this book before. I read the whole thing. I have the extended version, so I have the one that goes into the restaurant at the end of the universe. It's one of my fun little reading assignments. I love The Hitchhiker's Guide. It's so funny for no reason. When I quote 42 and people don't get it, I'm like, you have no understanding of me. Mr. L. Prosser was, as they say, only human. In other words, he was a carbon-based bipedal life form descended from an ape. More specifically, he was 40, fat, and shabby, and worked at the local council. Curiously enough, though, he didn't know it. He was also a direct male line descendant of Genghis Khan, though interviewing generations and racial mixing had so juggled his genes that he had no discernible characteristics, and the only vestiges left of Mr. L. Prosser of his mighty ancestry were a pronounced stoutness about the tum and a predilection for little fur hats. He was by no means a great warrior. In fact, he was a nervous, worried man. Today he was particularly nervous and worried because something had gone seriously wrong with his job, which was to see that Arthur Dent's house got cleared out of the way before his day was out. Come off it, Mr. Dent, he said. You can't win, you know. You have to lie in front of the bulldozer indefinitely. He tried to make his eyes blaze fiercely, but they just wouldn't do it. Arthur lay in the mud and squelched at him. I'm game, he said. We'll see who runs first. We'll see who rusts first. I have the big fancy hardback collector's book. Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, the one with the gold trim. That has the restaurant at the end of it, like the universe and everything. So long and thanks for all the fish. Young Zaphoid plays it safe and mostly harmless. That's the one I'm reading from right now. It's actually my dad's. I'm afraid you're going to have to accept it, said Mr. Prosser, gripping his fur hat and rolling it round the top of his head. This bypass has got to be built, and it's going to be built. First I've heard of it, said Arthur. Why's it got to be built? Mr. Prosser shook his finger at him for a bit, then stopped and put it away again. What do you mean, why's it got to be built? He said. It's a bypass. You've got to build the bypasses. Bypasses are devices that allow some people to dash from point A to point B very fast, while other people dash from point B to point A very fast. People living at point C, being a point directly in between, are often given to wonder what's so great about point A that so many people from point B are so keen to get there, and what's so great about point B that so many people from point A are so keen to get there. They often wish that people would just once and for all work out where the hell they wanted to be. Mr. Prosser wanted to be at point D. Point D wasn't anywhere in particular. It was just any convenient point a very long way away from point A, B, and C. He would have a nice little cottage at point D, with axes over the door, and spend a pleasant amount of time at point E, which would be the nearest pub to point D. His wife, of course, wanted climbing roses, but he wanted axes. He didn't know why. He just liked axes. He flushed hotly under the derisive grins of the bulldozer drivers. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, but was equally uncomfortable on each. Obviously, someone had been appallingly incompetent, and he'd hoped to God it wasn't him. Mr. Prosser said, You were quite entitled to make any suggestions or protests at the appropriate time, you know. Appropriate time, hooted Arthur. Appropriate time! The first I knew about it was when a workman arrived at my home yesterday. I asked him if he'd come to clean the windows, and he said no, he'd come to demolish the house. He didn't tell me straight away, of course. Oh, no. First he wiped a couple of windows and charged me a $5. Then he told me. But, Mr. Dent, the plans have been available in the local planning office since the last 9 months. Oh, yes, well, as soon as I heard, I went straight round to see them. Yesterday afternoon. You hadn't exactly gone out of your way to call attention to them, had you? I mean, like, actually telling anybody or anything. But the plans were on display. On display? I eventually had to go down to the cellar to find them. That's the display department. With a flashlight. Well, the lights had probably gone. So had the stairs. But look, you found the notice, didn't you? Yes, said Arthur. Yes, I did. It was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet stuck in a disused lavatory with a sign on the door that said, Beware of the leopard. A cloud passed overhead. It cast a shadow over Arthur Dent as he lay propped up on his elbow in the cold mud. It cast a shadow over Arthur Dent's house. Mr. Prosser frowned at it. It's not as if it's a particularly nice house. I'm sorry, but I happen to like it. You like the bypass? Oh, shut up, said Arthur Dent. Shut up and go away, and take your bloody bypass with you. You haven't got a leg to stand on, and you know it. Mr. Prosser's mouth opened and closed a couple of times, while his mind was for a moment filled with inexplicable but terribly attractive visions of Arthur Dent's house being consumed with fire, and Arthur himself running and screaming from the blazing ruin with at least 3 hefty spears protruding from his back. Mr. Prosser was often bothered with visions like these, and they made him feel very nervous. He stuttered for a moment and then pulled himself together. Mr. Dent, he said. Hello? Yes, said Arthur. Some factual information for you. Have you any idea how much damage that bulldozer would suffer if I just let it roll straight over you? How much? Said Arthur. None at all, said Mr. Prosser, and stormed nervously off, wondering why his brain was filled with 1,000 hairy horsemen all shouting at him. By a curious coincidence, none at all is exactly how much suspicion the ape descendant Arthur Dent had that one of his closest friends was not descended from an ape, but was in fact from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse, and not from Guildford as he usually claimed. Arthur Dent had never ever suspected this. This friend of his had first arrived on planet Earth some 15 Earth years previously and worked hard to blend himself into Earth society with, it must be said, some success. For instance, he had spent those 15 years pretending to be an out-of-work actor, which he was plausible enough. He had made one careless blunder, though. Because he had skimped a bit on his preparatory research, the information he had gathered had led him to choose the name Ford Prefect as being nicely inconspicuous. He was not conspicuously tall. His features were striking but not conspicuously handsome. His hair was wiry and gingerish and brushed backwards from the temples. His skin seemed to be pulled backward from the nose. There was something very slightly odd about him, but it was difficult to say what it was. Perhaps it was the eyes didn't seem to blink often enough, and when you talked to him for any length of time, your eyes began to involuntarily water on his behalf. Perhaps it was that he smiled slightly too broadly and gave people the unnerving impression that he was about to go for their neck. He struck most of the friends he had made on Earth as eccentric, but a harmless one, an unruly boozer with some oddish habits. For instance, he would often gatecrash university parties, get badly drunk, and start making fun of any astrophysicists he could find till he got thrown out. Sometimes he would get seized with oddly distracted moods and stare into the sky as if hypnotized until someone asked him what he was doing. Then he would start guiltily for a moment, relax, and grin. "Oh, just looking for flying saucers," he would joke, and everyone would laugh and ask him what sort of flying saucers he was looking for. "Green ones," he would reply with a wicked grin, laughed wildly for a moment, and then suddenly lunge for the nearest bar and buy an enormous round of drinks. Evenings like this usually ended badly. Ford would get out of his skull on whiskey, huddle in a corner with some girl, and explain to her in slurred phrases that honestly the color of flying saucers didn't matter that much really. Thereafter, staggering semi-paralytic down the night streets, he would often ask passing policemen if they knew the way to Beetlejuice. The policeman would usually say something like, "Don't you think it's about time you went home, sir?" "I'm trying to, baby, I'm trying to," is what Ford would reverently replied on these occasions. "I've now decided he will have a country accent, because it's funny." In fact, what he was really looking for when he stared distractedly into the sky was any kind of flying saucer at all. The reason he said green was that green was the traditional space livery of Beetlejuice trading scouts. Ford Prefect was desperate that any flying saucer at all would arrive soon, because 15 years was a long time to get stranded anywhere, particularly somewhere as mind-bogglingly dull as the Earth. Ford wished that a flying saucer would arrive soon because he knew how to flag flying saucers down and get lists from them. He knew how to see the marvels of the universe for less than $30 Altarian a day. In fact, Ford Prefect was a roving researcher for that wholly remarkable book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's from space, not England. He can be from South. But yeah, exactly. I 100% think... Am I in chapter 2 already? The fuck? Oh no, I'm not. Okay. Human beings are great adapters. And by lunchtime, life in the environs of Arthur's house had settled into a steady routine. It was Arthur's accepted role to lie squelching in the mud, making occasional demands to see his lawyer, his mother, or a good book. It was Mr. Prosser's accepted role to tackle Arthur with the occasional new ploy such as the For the Public Good talk, or March of Progress talk, or the They knocked my house down once and never looked back talk. Oh, they knocked my house down, once never looked back talk, and various others cajoleries and threats. It was the bulldozer driver's accepted role to sit around drinking coffee and experimenting with union regulations to see how they could turn the situation to their financial advantage. My god, they need more commas in this book. The earth moved slowly and diurnal course. The sun was beginning to dry out the mud that Arthur lay in. A shadow moved across him again. "Hello, Arthur," said the shadow. Arthur looked up, squinting into the sun, and was startled to see Ford Prefect standing above him. "Ford, hello, how are you?" "Fine," said Ford. "Look, are you busy?" Am I busy? Exclaimed Arthur. Well, I've just got all these bulldozers and things to lie in front of because they'll knock my house down if I don't. But other than that, well, no, not especially. Why? They don't have sarcasm on Beetlejuice, and Ford Prefect often failed to notice it unless he was concentrating. He said, Good. Is there anyone where you can talk? What? Said Arthur Dent. For a few seconds, Ford seemed to ignore him and stared fixedly into the sky like a rabbit trying to get run over by a car. Then suddenly, he squatted down beside Arthur. We've got to talk, he said urgently. Fine, said Arthur. Talk. And drink, said Ford. It's vitally important that we talk and drink. Now, we'll go to the pub in the village. He looked at the sky again, nervous, expectant. Look, don't you understand, shouted Arthur. He pointed at Prosser. That man wants to knock my house down. Ford glanced at him, puzzled. Well, he can do it while you're away, can he? He asked. But I don't want him to. Oh. Look, what is the matter with you, Ford? Said Arthur. Nothing. Nothing's the matter. Listen to me. I've got to tell you the most important thing you've ever heard. And I got to tell you now, and I got to tell you in the saloon bar, the Horse and the Groom. But why? Because you're going to need a very stiff drink. Ford stared at Arthur, and Arthur was astonished to find his will beginning to weaken. He didn't realize that this was because of an old drinking game that Ford learned to play in Hyperspace Force that served the Imaginite mining belts in the star system of Orion Beta. The game was not unlike the Earth game called Indian Wrestling, and was played like this. 2 contestants would sit at either side of a table with a glass in front of each of them. Between them would be placed a bottle of Jank Spirit, as immortalized in that ancient Orion mining song. Oh, don't give me none more of that old Jank Spirit. No, don't you give me none more of that old Jank Spirit, for my head will fly, my tongue will lie, my eyes will fry, I may die. Won't you pour me one more of that simple old Jank Spirit? Each of the 2 contestants would then concentrate their will on the bottle and attempt to tip it and pour spirit into the glass of his opponent, who would then have to drink it. The bottle would then be refilled, the game would be played again and again. Once you started to lose, you would probably keep losing, because once the effects of Jank Spirit is to depress telepsychic power. As soon as the predetermined quantity had been consumed, the final loser would have to perform a forfeit, which was usually obscenely biological. Ford Prefect usually played to lose. Ford stared at Arthur and began to think that perhaps he did want to go to the Horse and the Groom after all. But what about my house? He asked plaintively. Ford looked across to Mr. Prosser, and suddenly a wicked thought struck him. He wants to knock your house down. Yes, he wants to build. And he can't because you're laying in front of his bulldozer. Yes, and I'm sure we can come to some arrangement, said Ford. Excuse me, he shouted. Mr. Prosser, who was arguing with the spokesman for the bulldozer drivers about whether or not Arthur Dent constituted a mental health hazard and how much did she get paid if he did, looked around. He was surprised and slightly alarmed to see that Arthur had company. Yes, hello, he called. Has Mr. Dent come to his senses yet? Can we, for the moment, called Ford, assume that he hasn't? Well, sighed Mr. Prosser. And can we also assume, said Ford, that he's going to be staying here all day? So all your men are going to be standing around all day doing nothing. Could be. Well, if you're resigning doing that anyway, you don't actually need him to lie here all the time, do you? What? You don't, Ford said patiently. Actually need him here. Mr. Prosser thought about this. Well, no, not as such, he said. Not exactly need. Prosser was worried. He thought that one of them wasn't making a lot of sense. Ford said, so if you would just like to take it as read that he's actually here, and he and I could slip off down to the pub for half an hour. How does that sound? Mr. Prosser thought it sounded perfectly potty. In the text of Banter, one of the puzzles stopping them from knocking down Arthur's house. The game was unintentionally very difficult and sometimes illogical. Yeah, it's because it doesn't matter if his house gets knocked down. It's gonna be gone in like, I don't know, an hour. That sounds perfectly reasonable, he said in a reassuring tone of voice, wondering who he was trying to reassure. And if you want to pop off for a quick one... Oh, and if you want to pop off for a quick one yourself later on, we can always cover for you in return. Thank you very much, said Mr. Prosser, who no longer knew how to play this at all. Thank you very much. Yes, that's very kind. He frowned, then smiled, then tried to do both at once, failed, grasped hold of his fur hat, and rolled it fitfully around the top of his head. You could only assume that he had just won. So, continued Ford Prefect, if you'd just like to come over here and lie down. What? Said Mr. Prosser. I'm sorry. Perhaps I hadn't made myself fully clear. Somebody's got to lie down in front of the bulldozers, haven't they? Or they won't have anything to stop them from driving to Mr. Dan's house, will there? What? Mr. Prosser said again. It's very simple, said Ford. My client, Mr. Dent, says he will stop lying here in the mud on the sole condition that you come and take over him. What are you talking about? Oh, sorry, wrong accent. What are you talking about? Said Arthur. But Ford nudged him with his shoe to be quiet. You want me, said Prosser, spelling out this new thought to himself. To come and lie there? Yes. In front of the bulldozer? Yes. Instead of Mr. Dent? Yes. In the mud? In, as you say, the mud. As soon as Mr. Prosser realized that he was substantially the loser after all, it was as a weight lifted off his shoulders. This was more like the world he knew it. He sighed. In return for which, you will take Mr. Dent with you down to the pub. That's it exactly, said Ford. Mr. Prosser took a few nervous steps forward and stopped. Promise, he said. Promise, said Ford. He turned to Arthur. Come on, he said to him. Get up and let the man lie down. Arthur stood up, feeling as if he was in a dream. I ain't a big fancy city lawyer, but I do know my way around some things. Arthur stood up, feeling as if he was in a dream. Ford beckoned to Prosser, who sadly, awkwardly, sat down in the mud. He felt that his whole life was some kind of dream, and he sometimes wondered whose it was and whether they were enjoying it. The mud folded itself around his bottom and his arms and oozed into his shoes. Ford looked at him severely. And no sneaking around knocking Mr. Dan's house down while he's away, all right, he said. The mere thought, growled Mr. Prosser, hadn't even begun to speculate, he continued, settling himself back, about the merest possibility of crossing my mind. He saw the bulldozer driver's union representative approaching and let his head sink back and close his eyes. He was trying to marshal his arguments for proving that he did not now constitute a mental health hazard himself. He was far from certain about this. His mind seemed to be full of noises, horses, smoke, and the stench of blood. This always happened when he felt miserable or put upon, and he never had been able to explain it to himself. In a high dimension of which we know nothing, the mighty Khan bellowed with rage, but Mr. Prosser only trembled slightly and whimpered. He began to feel the little pricks of water behind his eyelids. Bureaucratic, angry men lying in the mud, indecipherable strangers handing out inexplicable humiliation, and an unidentified army of horsemen laughing at him in his head. What a day. What a day. Ford Prefect knew that it didn't matter a pair of dingoes' kidneys whether Arthur's house got knocked down now or not. Arthur remained very worried. But can we trust him? He said. Myself, I trust him to the end of the earth, said Ford. Oh yes, said Arthur. And how far's that? About 12 minutes away, said Ford. Come on, I need a drink. Whoa, crazy. Hi, dog sweaters. What's the dog sweater of the month? Now that it's June. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That was my neck. We'll probably read up to chapter 2. Yeah. And then be done. So read it up to chapter 3. Sorry, I'm just looking for something. Am I crazy? There's a part missing from this. Oh, I get to finally read that gigantic book. I know, right? Oh my god, wait, is there a part missing from this? I'm not crazy. Where is it? I mean, does the book not start with this? Does the book not start with this so long and thanks for all the fish part? That's like the best part of the book. Oh my god, bruh. That's crazy. Okay, well, chapter 2. Here's what the Encyclopedia Galactica has to say about alcohol. It says that alcohol is a colorless volatile liquid formed by the fermentation of sugars, and also notes it is intoxicatingly efficient on certain carbon-based life forms. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy also mentions alcohol. It says the best drink in existence is a pan-galactic gargle blaster. It says the effect of drinking a pan-galactic gargle blaster is like having your brain smashed out by a slice of lemon wrapped around a large gold brick. The guide also tells you which planets the best pan-galactic gargle blasters are mixed, how much you can expect to pay for one, and what voluntary organizations exist to help you rehabilitate afterwards. The guide even tells you how you can mix one yourself. Take the juice from one bottle of the Old Jank Spirit, it says, pour it into 1 measure of water from the seas of Sangatranius VO. That's Sangatranian seawater, it says. Oh, those Sangatranian fish. Allow 3 cubes of Arcturan Megagen to melt into the mixture. It must be properly iced, or the benzene is lost. Allow 4 liters of Chilean martial gas to bubble through it, in memory of all those happy hikers who have died in pleasure in the marshes of Valia. Oh my god, there's so many planet words. Where's that? Valia. Over the back of a silver spoon float a measure of qualactin, hypermint extract, redolent of all the beady odors of the dark qualactin zones, subtle, sweet, and mystic. Drop in the tooth of an Algolian sun tiger. Watch it dissolve, spreading the fires of the Algolian suns deep into the heart of the drink. Sprinkle Zamphor, add an olive, drink, but very carefully. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy sells rather better than the Encyclopedia Galactica. 6 pints of bitter, said Forward Prefect to the barman of the Horse and Groom. And quickly, please, the world's about to end. The barman of the Horse and Groom didn't deserve this sort of treatment. He was a dignified old man. He pushed his glasses up its nose and blinked at Forward Prefect. Ford ignored him and stared out the window, so the barman instead looked at Arthur, who shrugged helplessly and said nothing. So the barman said, "Oh, yes, sir. Sorry, he's British. Oh, yes, sir. Nice weather for it," and started pulling pints. He tried again. "Going to watch the match this afternoon, then?" Ford glanced around at him. No point," he said, and looked back out the window. "What's that? Foregone conclusion, then, you reckon, sir?" said the barman. "Arsenal without a chance." No," said Ford. "Just the world's about to end." "Oh, yes, sir, so you said," said the barman, looking over his glasses this time at Arthur. "Lucky escape for the Arsenal if it did." Ford looked back at him, genuinely surprised. "No, not really," he said. He frowned. The barman breathed heavily. "There you are, sir, 6 pints," he said. Arthur smiled at him wanly and shrugged again. He turned and smiled wanly at the rest of the pub, just in case any of them had heard what was going on. None of them had, and none of them could understand what he was smiling at them for. A man sitting next to Ford at the bar looked at the 2 men, looked at the 6 pints, did a swift burst of mental arithmetic, arrived at an answer he liked, and grinned a stupid hopeful grin at them. "Get off," said Ford. "They're ours," giving him a look that would have made an Algolian sun tiger get on with what it was doing. Ford slapped a 5-pound note in the bar and he said, "Keep the change." "From what?" "From a $5. Thank you, sir." "You got 10 minutes left to spend it." The barman decided to simply walk away for a bit. "Ford," said Arthur, "would you please tell me what the hell is going on?" "Drink up," said Ford. You got 3 pints to get through." 3 pints," said Arthur. "At lunchtime?" The man next to Ford grinned and nodded happily. Ford ignored him. He said, "Time is an illusion. Lunchtime, doubtably so." "Very deep," said Arthur. "You should send that to the Reader's Digest. They've got a page for people like you." "Drink up." "Why 3 pints all of a sudden?" Muscle relaxant. You'll need it." Muscle relaxant. Arthur stared into his beer. "Did I do anything wrong today?" he said. "Or has the world always been like this, and I've been too wrapped up in myself to notice?" "All right," said Ford. "I'll try to explain. How long have we known each other?" "How long?" Arthur thought. About 5 years, maybe 6, he said. Most of it seemed to make some kind of sense at the time." "All right," said Ford. "And how would you react if I said that I'm not from Guilford after all, but from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Beetlejuice?" Arthur shrugged in a so-so way. "I don't know," he said, taking a pull of beer. "Why? Do you think it's the sort of thing you're likely to say?" Ford gave up. It really wasn't worth bothering at the moment. With the world being about to end, he just said, "Drink up." He added, perfectly factually, "The world's about to end." Arthur gave the rest of the pub another wan smile. The rest of the pub frowned at him. A man waved at him to stop smiling at them and mind his own business. "This must be Thursday," said Arthur to himself, sinking low over his beer. "I could never get the hang of Thursdays." How long is chapter 3? I think we can get through it. Oh! I dropped something. Ugh! Sorry, I'm sitting up so I can read better. Trying to find a way to like prop this book so I can see it. Doesn't work. It's much better. There we go. On this particular Thursday, something was moving quietly through the ionosphere many miles above the surface of the planet. Several somethings, in fact. Several dozen huge, yellow, chunky, slab-like somethings. Huge as office blocks, silent as birds. They soared with ease, basking in electromagnetic rays from the star's soul, biding their time, grouping, preparing. A bit earlier. Okay. Yeah, so I forget if it's the movie or the show, but it's the opener of one of them. So that's why I was like, wait, where is it? Because it makes sense, like, chronologically. It's the opener of, like, the world's about to end, so all the dolphins leave. The planet beneath them was almost perfectly oblivious of their presence, which was just how they wanted to be for the moment. The huge yellow something went unnoticed at the Goonhilly they passed over Cape Canaveral without a blip. Mero and Jodrell Bank looked straight through them, which was a pity, because it was exactly the sort of thing they'd been looking for all these years. The only place they registered was on a small black device called a sub-ethocentomatic, which winked away quietly to itself. It nestled in the darkness inside a leather satchel, which Ford Prefect habitually wore slung around his neck. The contents of Ford's satchel were quite interesting, in fact, and they would have made any Earth physicist's eyes pop out of its head. which is why he always concealed them by keeping a couple of dog-eared scripts for plays he pretended he was auditioning for, stuffed in the top. Besides the sub-ethnocensomatic and the scripts, he had an electronic thumb, a short, squat black rod, smooth and matte with a couple of flat switches and dials at one end. He also had a device that looked rather like a large electronic calculator. This had about 100 tiny flat buttons and a screen about 4 inches square on which any one of the million pages could be summoned at a moment's notice. It looked insanely complicated, and this was one of the reasons why the snug plastic cover it fitted had the words written, "Don't panic," in large friendly letters on the front. The other reason was that this device was in fact the most remarkable of all books to ever come out of the great publishing corporations of Ursa Minor, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The reason why it was published in the form of a micro-sub Meson electric component is that it was reprinted in a normal book form, and an interstellar hitchhiker would require several inconveniently large buildings to carry it around in. Beneath that, in Ford Prefix Satchel, were a few ballpoints, a notepad, and a largish bath towel from Marks & Spencer. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has a few things to say on the subject of towels. A towel, it says, is about the most massively useful thing an interstellar hitchhiker can have, my god. Partly, it has great practical value. You can wrap it around you for warmth as you bound across the cold moons of Jaglin Beta. You can lie on it in the brilliant marble-sanded beaches of Sancantranus V. Inhaling the heady sea vapors, you can sleep under it beneath the stars, which shine so readily on the desert world of Kakrafun. Use it to sail a mini raft down the slow heavy river moth. Wet it for use in hand-to-hand combat. Wrap it around your head to ward off noxious fumes, or avoid the gaze of ravenous bug-bladder beast of trawl, a mind-bogglingly stupid animal. It assumes that if you can't see it, it can't see you. Daft to the bush, but very ravenous. You can wave your towel in emergencies as a distress signal, and of course, dry yourself off with it if it still seems to be clean enough. More importantly, a towel has immense psychological value. For some reason, if a strag is a non-hitchhiker, discovers that a hitchhiker has a towel with him, he will automatically assume that he is also in possession of a toothbrush, washcloth, soap, tin of biscuits, flask, compass, map, ball of string, gnat spray, wet weather gear, spacesuit, etc., etc. Furthermore, the strag will then happily lend the hitchhiker any of those or a dozen other items the hitchhiker might accidentally have lost. What the strag will think is that any man who can hitch the length and breadth of the galaxy, rough it slum, struggle against terrible odds, win through, and still know where his towel is clearly a man to be reckoned with. Hence a phrase that is passed in the hitchhiking slang as in, "Hey, you sass that hoopy, Ford Prefect? It's a fruit who really knows where his towel is." Sass means know, be aware of, meet. Again, you know with. Hoopy, really together guy. Fruit, really amazingly together guy. Nestling quietly on top of the towel in Ford Prefect Satchel, the sub-ethnocensomatic began to wink more quickly. Miles above the surface of the planet, the huge yellow somethings began to fan out. At Jodrell Bank, someone decided it was time for a nice flaxen cup of tea. "You got a towel with you?" said Ford suddenly to Arthur. Arthur, struggling through his third pint, looked round at him. "Why? What? No, should I have?" He'd given up on being surprised. There didn't seem like a point any longer. Ford clicked his tongue in irritation. "Drink up," he urged. At that moment, the dull sound of a rumbling crash from outside filtered through the low murmur of the pub, through the sound of the jukebox, through the sound of the man next to Ford hiccuping over the whiskey Ford had eventually bought him. Arthur choked on his beer, leaped to his feet, and yelled, "What's that?" "Don't worry," said Ford. "They haven't started yet." "Thank God for that," said Arthur and relaxed. "It's probably just your house being knocked down," said Ford, downing his last pint. "What?" shouted Arthur. Suddenly Ford's spell was broken. Arthur looked wildly around him and ran to the window. "My God, they're knocking down my house. What the hell am I doing in the pub, Ford?" "It hardly makes a difference at this stage," said Ford. "Let them have their fun." "Fun?" yelped Arthur. "Fun?" He quickly checked out the window again that they were talking about the same thing. "Damn their fun," he hooted and ran out of the pub, furiously waving a nearly empty beer glass. He made no friends in the pub all at lunchtime. "Stop, you vandals, you homewreckers, you half-grazed Visigoths, stop, will you?" bawled Arthur. Ford would have to go after him. Turning quickly to the barman, he asked for 4 packets of peanuts. "There you are, sir," said the barman, slapping the packets on the bar. 28 pence if you'd be so kind. Ford was very kind. He gave the barman another £5 note and told him to keep the change. The barman looked at it and then looked at Ford. He suddenly shivered. He experienced a momentary sensation that he didn't understand because no one on Earth had ever experienced it before. In moments of great stress, every life form that exists gives out a tiny subliminal signal. This signal simply communicates an exact and almost pathetic sense of how far that being is from the place of his birth. On Earth, it is never possible to be farther than 16,000 miles from your birthplace, which really isn't far, so such signals are too minute to be noticed. Ford Prefect was at this moment under great stress, and he was born 600 light years away in the near vicinity of Betelgeuse. The barman reeled for a moment, hit by a shocking, incomprehensible sense of distance. He didn't know what it meant, but he looked at Ford Prefect for a new sense of respect, almost awe. "Are you serious, sir?" he said in a small whisper which had the effects of silencing the pub. "You think the world's going to end?" "Yes," said Ford. "But this afternoon." Ford had recovered himself. He was at his flippest. "Yes," he said gaily. "In less than 2 minutes, I would estimate." The barman couldn't believe this conversation he was having, but he couldn't believe the sensation he had just had either. "Isn't there anything we can do about it then?" he said. "No, nothing," said Ford, stuffing the peanuts into his pocket. Someone in the hush bar suddenly laughed at how stupid everyone had become. The man sitting next to Ford was a bit sozzled by now. His eyes weaved their way up to Ford. "I thought," he said, "if the world was going to end, we were meant to lie down, put a paper bag over our head or something." "If you like, yes." "That's what they told us in the army," said the man, and his eyes began the long trek back towards his whiskey. "Will that help?" asked the barman. "No," said Ford, and gave him a friendly smile. "Excuse me," he said. "I gotta go." With a wave, he left. The pub was silent for a moment longer, and then, embarrassingly enough, the man with the laugh did it again. The girl he had dragged along to the pub with him had grown to loathe him dearly over the last hour, and it would probably have been a great satisfaction to her to know that in a minute and a half or so, he would suddenly evaporate into a whiff of hydrogen, ozone, and carbon monoxide. However, when the moment came, she was too busy evaporating herself to notice it. The barman cleared his throat. He heard himself say, "Last orders, please." Southernness is Listen, he has the mannerisms of a southern person. You can't tell me otherwise. The huge yellow machines began to sink downward and to move faster. Ford knew they were there. This wasn't the way he had wanted it. Running up the lane, Arthur had nearly reached his house. He didn't notice how cold it had suddenly become. He didn't notice the wind. He didn't notice the sudden irrational squall of rain. He didn't notice anything but the caterpillar bulldozers crawling over the rubble that had been his home. You barbarians!" he yelled. "I'll sue the council for every penny it's got. I'll have you hung, drawn, and quartered, and whipped, and boiled until you've had enough." Ford was running after him, very fast. Very, very fast. "And then I'll do it again," yelled Arthur. "And when I finish, I will take all the little bits and I will jump on them." Arthur didn't notice that the men were running from the bulldozers. He didn't notice that Mr. Prosser was staring hectically into the sky. What Mr. Prosser had noticed was that huge yellow somethings were screaming to the clouds. Impossibly huge yellow somethings. "And I will carry on jumping on them," yelled Arthur, still running, "until I get blisters, or I can think of anything even more unpleasant to do, and then—" Arthur tripped and fell headlong, rolled and landed flat on his back. At last he noticed something was going on. His finger shot upward. "What the hell is that?" he shrieked. Whatever it was, it raced across the sky in its monstrous yellowness, tore the sky apart with mind-boggling noise, and leaped off into the distance, leaving the gaping air to shut behind it, with a bang that drove your ears 6 feet into your skull. Another one followed and did exactly the same thing, only louder. It is difficult to say exactly what the people on the surface of the planet were doing now, because they really didn't know what they were doing themselves. None of it made a lot of sense, running into houses, running out of houses, howling noiselessly at the sky. All around the world, streets exploded with people, cars skidded into each other as the noise fell on them, and rolled off like a tidal wave over hills and valleys, deserts and oceans, seeming to flatten everything it hit. Only one man stood and watched the sky, stood with terrible sadness in his eyes and rubber bungs in his ears. He knew exactly what was happening, and had known ever since the sub-etho-sensomatic had started winking in the dead of night beside his pillow, and wakened him with a start. It was what he had waited for all these years. But when he had deciphered the signal pattern sitting alone in the small dark room, a coldness had gripped him and squeezed his heart. Of all the races in all the galaxy who could have come and said hello to the planet Earth, he thought, didn't it just have to be the Vogons? Still, he knew what he had to do. As the Vogon craft screamed through the air high above him, he opened his satchel. He threw away a copy of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. He threw away a copy of Godspell. He wouldn't need them where he was going. Everything was ready, everything was prepared. He knew where his towel was. A sudden silence hit the earth. If anything was worse than the noise, for a while nothing happened. The great ships hung motionless in the sky, over every nation on Earth. Motionless they hung. Huge, heavy, steady in the sky, a blasphemy against nature. Many people went straight into shock as their minds tried to encompass what they were looking at. The ships hung in the sky in much the same way that bricks don't. And still nothing happened. Then there was a slight whisper, a sudden spacious whisper of open ambient sound. Every hi-fi set in the world, every radio, every television, every cassette recorder, every woofer, every tweeter, every mid-range driver in the world quietly turned itself on. Every tin can, every dustbin, every window, every car, every wine glass, every sheet of rusty metal became activated as an acoustically perfect sounding board. Before the Earth passed away, it was going to be treated to the very ultimate sound and reproduction, the greatest public address system ever built. But there was no concert, no music, no fanfare. Just a simple message. People of Earth, your attention, please. A voice said, and it was wonderful. Wonderful, perfect quadraphonic sound with distortion levels so low as to make a brave man weep. This is Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz of the Galactic Hyperspace Planning Council, the voice continued. As you will no doubt be aware, the plans for development of the outlying regions of the galaxy require the building of a hyperspatial express route through your star system. And regrettably, your planet is one of those scheduled for demolition. The process will take slightly less than 2 of your Earth minutes. Thank you. The PA died away. Uncomprehending terror settled on watching people of Earth. Terror moved slowly through the gathered crowds as if they were iron filings in a sheet of a board and a magnet was moving beneath them. Panic sprouted again, desperate fleeing panic, but there was nowhere to flee to. Observing this, the Vogons turned on their PA again and said, There is no point in acting all surprised about it. All the planning charts and demolition orders have been on display in your local planning department in Alpha Centauri for 50 of your Earth years. So you've had plenty of time to lodge any formal complaint, and it is far too late to start making a fuss about it now. The PA fell silent again, and its echo drifted across the land. The huge ships turned slowly in the sky with easy power. On the underside of each, a hatchway opened, an empty black square. This time, somebody somewhere must have manned a radio transmitter, located a wavelength, and broadcast a message back to the Vogon ships to plead on behalf of the planet. Nobody ever heard what they said. They only heard the reply. The PA slammed back to life again, and the voice was annoyed. It said, What do you mean you've never been to Alpha Centauri? For heaven's sake, mankind, it's only 4 light years away, you know. I'm sorry, but if you can't be bothered to take an interest in local affairs, that's your own lookout. Energize the demolition beams. Light poured out of the hatchways. I don't know, said the voice in the PA. Apathetic, bloody planet. I've got no sympathy at all. It cut off. There was a terrible, ghastly silence. There was a terrible, ghastly noise. There was a terrible, ghastly silence. The Vogon constructor fleet coasted away into the inky, starry void. That is chapter 1 through 3. R.I.P. Yeah, R.I.P. Earth. What do you mean you've never been to Alpha Centauri? What do you mean? That's how I feel when everyone's like, we haven't been past the moon. What do you mean you guys haven't been to space? That's where I come from. Our own planet's like an unquestionable, unidentifiable number of light years away. Also, Hoshi Sorano just messaged me, moved to Twitch, and I said, no. She's still streaming? Can we reverse raid her? No, she's not still streaming. Oh, that's unfortunate. Anyways, that was the first 3 chapters. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We are not even... Hold on. 4... Okay. We're almost an 1/8 through the book. We're almost an 1/8 through the book. We're on page 27 out of like almost 800. That's not even an 1/8. Anyways. Yeah. I need to watch the first 45 minutes. You do. That's why you gotta be at the beginning. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe when memberships are unlocked, we'll do a membership watch along of the BBC show. I think that'd be fun. 120 is about, yeah, there we go. Wait, no, wouldn't it be 140th? If I'm like 28, hold on, I'm just gonna do the math. Calculator. Oh, is the first book only about 2? It's multiple books? I got the big version. I was just gonna read the whole thing, never mind. Maybe if you're good, I'll read the rest of them. But for the first book, there are... Okay, yeah. Here we go. The first book is 143 pages, so 28. Or about 19% through the book. Or we're about 19% of the way. That's pretty good. It's pretty solid for a first stream. Okay. I'm gonna go keep playing Deltarune. I love Deltarune. I think I streamed Sunday for Off-Kai packing. And yeah, Off-Kai so soon, guys. I'm so excited. I'm so excited! Yippee! Yippee! I'm so excited! Woohoo! Woohoo! I leave in 2 weeks. Eee! I'm very excited. I gotta figure out what streams I'm gonna do next week and what I'm gonna do before I leave. Okay. Otsudorum. Even more links drawn. What do you mean links drawn? Wait, what do you mean links drawn? Planks? Oh. I have to still draw them. Gotta go. Hold on. Sorry. Yeah. I've been putting it off. Maybe I'll do that while I watch. I'm technically watching someone else play Deltarune while I watch because I want to see the reactions. So maybe I'll do that. Okay. What should focus on packing? Yeah, we'll do that Sunday. We gotta make a list on Sunday. So long, and thanks for all the fish. It's sad it had to come to this. I'm gonna learn that song and sing it during karaoke. Okay. Otsudoram, good night. Sorry, I don't know what that was. Okay, bye.